Welcome everybody to our latest Expert Insights webinar. We'll give it a minute or two for people to join. Obviously, as you'd expect, this is a really popular topic. We've had a lot of people sign up to this one. So I'll give it a minute or two. As ever, if you've been to these before, you'll know the drill, but we're always really interested to find out where people are dialing in from. So if you want to just pop where you're dialing from in the chat, so we can see where people are in the world today. It's always really interesting to see see the sort of the spread. Where are you dialing in from, Ben?
I'm actually over in North Alabama, over here in the States. So got my smooth, melodious Southern accent coming through in the conversation.
I was trying to sort of think, where would I pitch that? I'm not that up on it, but I thought it definitely sounds more Southern.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can crank it up. I can crank up the twang if I need to, but I usually it tones down naturally when I'm talking to someone else elsewhere. But yeah, it's funny because the actual research they do here in the States shows that if you have a Southern accent, people automatically assume your IQ is a little bit lower because we talk a little bit slower in general. Although I don't usually talk slow. I usually get excited and talk fast. But outside the US, they're like, what is the most sexy accent possible from? And they're like, it's the Southern accent. So like, that's something going for me for when I talk to my friends who are in the overseas audiences, at least.
Yeah, there's a lot going into my world of psychology now. There's a lot of research on, exactly that, the way your accent can open doors or shut doors. I think it's the same over here, but we've got the other way around over here. So it's the Northerners who are seen as in a different light to the Southerners. I'm from the Midlands, so I don't fit in anywhere. I go up north and I'm a Southerner. I go down south and I'm a Northerner, so I don't fit in anywhere. So
I heard that there was a piece of research that said that people think that Northerners are more likely to be friendly, which is one of the many reasons why they'll often put call centres up north in the UK, because they sound more friendly. So there you go.
Got some different locations coming in. Newcastle, that's a great accent, isn't it? I love the Newcastle accent. New Forest, love it. Lovely part of the world. Right, I think we should probably get started because I really want to give you as much airtime as possible today, Ben, because I am so excited about this topic. And you are one of the world's leading experts, right, in HR and AI. So really interested to hear where this world is going. I think we're all fascinated by this. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Emma Bridger. I'm one of the founders of the EX Space. I also run a consultancy called People Lab. We are passionate about all things experience and engagement. And I'm not going to give you the big sell on either of those businesses, but just say that the EX Space is our membership-based learning community. We've got a really kind of wonderful, growing, vibrant community on there, offering masterclasses, accredited certified masterclasses, tools, templates. So if you're interested in getting involved, let us know. That's all I'm going to say about that. Give it a plug. Also, Katie will also mention at the end, we have got some more webinars coming up, but I haven't got the info in front of me, and I'm still in a Monday morning at the moment, trying to get into Monday afternoon here. So you can remind me, Katie, later what we've got coming up, what the schedule's looking like. We've got some really good people booked though. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Katie, my colleague, who is going to introduce Ben, and to say a massive thank you to you, Ben, for being here with us today. Really appreciate it. So over to you, Katie.
Thanks, and yeah, don't worry, I'll definitely share what's coming up shortly. So before we go there, we've obviously got the brilliant Ben Eubanks with us today. So Ben is an HR industry analyst and influencer. He's the principal analyst at Lighthouse Research and Advisory, where he oversees development of research, assets and insights to support HR, learning and talent executives. He's also an author and the host of We're Only Human, a podcast dedicated to improving human resources, one HR pro at a time. And of course, he is the author of this book, now in its second edition, Artificial Intelligence for HR, which we'll be exploring today throughout this session. So I'll hand over to Ben to answer the question, AI and HR, a terrible combination or a brilliant opportunity? Welcome, Ben.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it very much. And so glad to be here with all of you. As I'm going through, if something occurs to you, there's a question, there's something curious about, please drop in the chat. I'll try to make sure and finish in enough time to answer those as we go through today. And it's funny because I was thinking about what to title this today when I talked to my friends who were over in the UK neck of the woods. Brilliant is a word I hear a lot. And so like I had to find a way to work that into the title for this session. So we're going to dive into this. I'll share some good practical stories with you, some ideas, some things that really make this relevant and tangible to every single one of us, and hopefully do it in a fun way. So let's dive right into this. So I don't know if anyone is a chess player or is a fan of chess history, but this gentleman here back about 25 years ago was in the news a lot. So this is Garry Kasparov, and he at the time was probably the best chess player in the entire world. And IBM had built this computer they called Deep Blue to compete with Garry in a competition to see who was better. And they went head to head in a series of games. And ultimately, in the end, Garry ended up losing out to the machine, to the computer. And the headlines the very next day said, well, that's it for us humans. The computers, the machines, they're better than us already. What hope is there for us? Well, I don't know about you, but I have more work to do today than I've ever had in the past. So I don't know that they're, the visions of them taking over everything are really true, that that's actually going to happen. And based on the stuff that you're going to hear from me today, I'm hoping you're going to pick up some ideas on how to make your work more meaningful, more valuable, more useful to yourself, to your company, and to the people you're serving. And probably not the doom and gloom headlines we see all over the place in terms of what AI is and is doing to our field. So you heard all the good things about me already. I also run this event every summer called HR Summer School. It's totally free and gives everybody a chance to re-engage on why we do HR and why it matters. So if you're curious about that, my contacts at the end, you can ping me. You can do a quick search on Google and find that easily. And Summer School is a way for us to lift up the community and give back to all of our friends in the space who are doing the hard work every day. I got into HR when I got out of college. I wanted to be in HR when I was a kid, even before I knew it was called. Long story for another time. But I have such a fondness and appreciation for the field and for all of you who are doing the hard work every day to take care of your people and to try to make sure you're doing the right things, both on the legal side, but also just doing the right things by your people overall. A lot of respect for every one of you in that space. So why AI? Of all the things we could be talking about, why this? I don't know about you, but when I worked as an HR leader, when I was running an HR team, one of the things that kept me going day to day was my notebook. I had a list of all the things I had to take care of, line by line, all the things that were my priorities for the day. And you know how it is. Sometimes you go through a day and your list is actually longer at the end of the day than it was when you started. You didn't get to check anything off because something kind of blew up and landed in your lap. And the reason I love talking about AI is because usually those things at the bottom of my list, the stuff that I really wanted to do at some point, but I never, became my someday tasks, things like creating a great culture, having a set of leaders who are properly developed so that if someone ever left, we weren't pulling our hair out and screaming and running around. We said, that's a bummer, but at least we've developed Kelsey and she's ready to go. We've developed Jamie and they're ready to step into that role. I wanted those kind of things, but unfortunately at the top of my list were all these other just daily mundane tasks that kept popping on there that never could get to that bottom of that list. And what you'll see in the next 45 minutes or so is that AI has the ability already to help us take some of those things off the top of that list, to check them off, to tick them off, if you will, and get them out of the way so we can focus on those things that do matter. Those things that bring out our best effort, our best creativity, our best work as HR leaders and as people overall. That's the opportunity we have in front of us. So let's dive into what that looks like and how we can do that potentially. Now, if you've spent any time looking around, you know that there are no shortage of headlines about what AI is and what it's going to do to our field. The favorite one probably for me is the one here at the bottom. When I was writing the book, I came across this one and had to weave it in there because it's painted this picture of AI is going to bring it all down. It's going to be terrible. I don't know about you, but when I was putting together my strategy for hiring and thinking about what I wanted our employer brand to be as a company, I didn't use the words dehumanizing, impenetrable, frustrating, grim. I didn't use those kind of words to describe that. But I'm going to caution you that if you just listen to the technical part of what I say today and skip over the reason for it, the underlying purpose for it, then that's what you'll end up with. You'll end up with this process that's completely automated and doing all the AI stuff and wonderful, but you're missing out on the value it can bring to your people and to the work you're doing every day. I want you to feel that connection, and it's not to keep your people at arm's length, it's to let us serve them at a deeper level. So I need you to hold on for a second. Hold on to your chair, hold on to your seat. This is as technical as I'm going to get on the AI front. If you can stick with me for one slide here, we're going to be okay. We're going to dive into more practical stuff in HR specifically. I'll give you use cases and examples. Today, I'm going to talk about ChatGPT and how you can use it. If you've already tested it out, great, we can compare notes. If you haven't used it yet, I'll give you some ideas on how it can be used and what you can do with it. And we're going to talk later at the end about what this means for our field overall. So that's what's ahead. It's not going to all be nerdy AI stuff. We're going to talk about a lot of things that matter to you practically in your day-to-day. All right, so in terms of this, what is AI? What does it mean? The simplest layer of it is machine learning. So if I was going to log into your Netflix or your Hulu account and look at the kind of movies and TV shows that recommend to me, it may show me romantic comedies. It may show me foreign dramas or even horror. If you log into mine, it's going to show you Armageddon, end of the world. It's all, coming to an end kind of movies. I don't know what that says about me, but what it tells me is that that algorithm has tailored and predicted those things that I'm going to like, and it's going to give you more of that. That's all machine learning is. It's teaching machine to learn from little signals and then make a recommendation or prediction of what's next. That's all that it takes. And so when we watch something and we thumbs up or thumbs down, we watch a little bit and then quit and never come back. We watch it all the way to the end and go to the next episode and the next episode. Those are little signals that teach that algorithm. And so that's all machine learning is at the most fundamental level. So when I talk later about maybe using it for looking at resumes for key skills in someone to hire, or we're using it to predict which training someone might need based on the skills that they have or the career path they're on. Like that's what machine learning is and how it fits into that bigger picture. The second level of this, generative AI, has been all over the news in the last year. It's been a big focus in the headlines. I'm going to spend some time today really diving into how you can use that. The reason I love this is because ChatGPT took this conversation about AI from this very theoretical thing and made it very practical for all of us. Any one of us right now can go and test this out for free and see how it can be incorporated into our work to make us more capable, faster, more responsive HR leaders. I think all of us would want to be that ultimately. The way these are taught or trained, though, these algorithms are trained on what the researchers call the internet. They take a bunch of information on the internet, some of it intelligent, and if you've spent much time on the internet, some of it not so intelligent, and they use all that stuff to train an algorithm on how to respond. And they call it generative AI because it generates a new answer when you ask a question. It's creating something new that wasn't there before. It's generating that on the spot. And again, I'll show you some examples of what that looks like in practice. And the last level of AI, the most complicated one, is beyond our lifetime. It's artificial general intelligence. And everybody talks about Terminator being the example of that. That's a negative, scary version. I like C-3PO. He's friendly, he's helpful, he's warm and fuzzy and nice, right? But that sort of autonomous AI that just runs on its own, that does its own thing, that's not connected to people, that's probably beyond our lifetime based on the researchers that I speak with, the programmers, the scientists that are in that field. They say it's really neat and easy to do that for a movie screen, really hard to do that in practice and in real life. And underlying all those is this fundamental need for AI to be used in an ethical, responsible, unbiased, and explainable sort of way. There's a really interesting example of how AI is being used already. And there's a research study done recently by Harvard, and they gave a version of AI, either what they called strong AI that was supposed to be very predictive, or a weak AI, which was just meant to be sort of an assistant, to these recruiters. And the recruiters got to use as much as they want to, and then they got to do as much work as they wanted to and kind of let the AI help them. And what they found were those recruiters who used what they deemed a strong AI, they started leaning more and more on that and let go of the wheel and let the AI just drive, and ultimately ended up going into the ditch more often than not. But those recruiters who were using what they called weak AI, it was not very predictive, it was very narrowly focused, they kept their hands on the wheel and ended up making better hiring decisions and more predictable or more consistent hiring decisions long term. And so there's lots of things in there around the ethics of this and are we using this in a responsible way? And again, that'll weave through the conversation today as we go. All right, deep breath. You're all with me still. We're still good. Everyone's completely unharmed by that deep dive into that. Let's move on to some things that are relevant and practical to all of us. Here are some of the ways that we're seeing AI already being used in this field. And I'll tell you, I, as a person who does a lot of research, as a person who spent time in the trenches as an HR leader, I don't have a lot of tolerance for, oh, well, in 10 years, this is possible, because all of us have problems today that we need to solve. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm not looking at it through what's possible, what may happen. I'm looking at this through the lens of what would have taken care of an issue or a challenge that I had, that my managers had, that our leadership team had right away. And these are examples right here of some of the things we're already seeing. Everything from using AI tools to do predictive safety issues in workers' comp perspective, retention prediction, figuring out which of your people may be likely to stick around or not. Things like nudges to say, we've looked at what leads to high performance, and we're going to nudge someone to take this action because we know it's good for them. Even if they forget, we're going to nudge them back. Like all of these things we're seeing right now already being used. And again, if something in here you're curious about, ping me at the very end. I'd be happy to answer more about it or give you some examples of what that looks like in practice. But first, I want to give you an example of this. Right now, like we have the ability already to automate anything in the hiring process completely. This was actually possible years ago. So Amazon, in one of their examples, they had gone through, they were trying to find software engineers in one of their markets, kept striking out, kept having difficulty doing that. So they built an algorithm that said, okay, we're going to send out, we're going to start looking for people. If someone applies and we look at their resume, let's say Ben applies, looks at my resume, Ben spent 3 years at Google, or Ben's got a bachelor's degree in software engineering. Okay, wonderful. We're going to send him an assessment. Take this assessment automatically. No human contact, automatically sends that out. I take the assessment, I pass the assessment with flying colors, good scores. That algorithm will then send me an offer at the current market rate without me ever talking to a hiring manager, interacting with a recruiter, no communication or contact with the company at all. Now, I don't know about you, but that makes me feel a little bit weird to hear that. It kind of freaks me out just a little bit to hear the company actually doing that. And this was a real thing they did, live, public. Anyone could have seen it at the time when they were doing this. And when I talk to people like you, my friends who are in the HR space, I'm like, why would that make you feel weird? What bothers you about that? A whole range of things from, well, we know times people that lie about the interview process and someone shows up who couldn't have passed that test. Or what if the person looks great on paper, but they actually can't do some of those kinds of things? Or how about this one? What if you're the candidates? Put yourself in their shoes. Would any of you ever want to work for a company that wouldn't even spend 5 minutes with you on the phone to explain what the job's about, or why they wanted you, or why you were a good fit for the role? Most of us would say, absolutely not. We don't want to work for a company like that. There's so many issues wrapped into this, but that's entirely possible. That's the example I gave you earlier, that headline that said, the future of AI, the future of hiring in this world of AI can be grim and dehumanizing if it's done that way, to keep people at arm's length, not to bring them closer and understand more about them and to serve them in a deeper way. How about this? Maybe you've got this resume before. What, this person wants to work with us for our company? This is incredible. I can't, like, oh, this is exciting. Like maybe we fooled them into applying because they don't even know who we are. Let's go work with this. We can't wait to do this interview. And the person shows up for the interview after seeing this incredible resume, and it's this guy instead. The resume doesn't tell us everything about someone. As much as we'd like for it to, the resume is a list of someone's perceptions of their previous accomplishments. How many times have you seen a resume where someone says, hey, not a team player. I don't really work well with others. I am very aggravating, on days that end in Y. People don't put those things on their resume. They don't say that in the interview. Like, are you a team player? Absolutely. And yet we find these things out about people all the time when it comes to the hiring process, when it comes to the screening process. We see, oh goodness, like we missed a cue, we missed something, or hopefully we picked it up and we don't end up hiring that person because it's not going to work out. And AI has a hard time seeking and finding those kinds of nuances that we can detect and pick up in our interactions and our conversations. So all those things to say, kind of silly, kind of funny, but I love that example because it shows clearly that AI is great at some things and not so great at others. Now, if I put you to the test here and I said, okay, think about all of the things that you do in a given day, in a given week, in a given month. If you had to rank them, the things like, I love doing this, I can't wait to do it, it makes me so excited, to that thing at the bottom of the list where you said, oh gosh, I've got to do that tomorrow. I think I'm going to call in sick. That list of things you have to do, if there was some things on the bottom of that list that you're like, if I never had to do that again, I would be perfectly happy. What would those things be? Because I pressed you and we're sitting here together, we're chatting around the table, and I pressed you on what those things might be. And you're welcome to drop those in the chat if you'd like to. But some of the common answers that I get from people on that kind of thing are like managing my inbox, having to schedule and reschedule and reschedule interviews, having to go through and do benefits reconciliations to figure out, who paid for this? Did we charge them for that? Did we get the deductible right and deduction right and all those kind of things? Checking payroll errors. all those kinds of things are very robotic, very task-oriented, and they don't make us feel human. They don't bring out our best efforts. But if I said, okay, at the top of your list, what are those things that you would never give away, that you would never automate, not in a million years? Things like creating a great culture, things like celebrating and appreciating the people around you. We all generally know those things that are more human and more focused and we need to be in the loop on. And we also know those things that are pretty repetitive, robotic, that we probably could hand off and be perfectly fine with. I love telling that story because most often we think, what would be a good candidate for something that's good for automation? And most of us already intuitively know those things that would be a good fit right there as we think through that. All right. So we talked through some good stuff here. I want to take some time now and talk about generative AI. I told you I was going to share a little bit about ChatGPT and what that is, what it does. And I'm so excited about this conversation because I said this puts AI in the hands of any of us that want to test it out. It allows any of us to start using it immediately today to be better at our jobs. And it's creating an opportunity for us to have that impact, to have the excitement about HR we had when we got into it probably in the first place. If you've got to that point where you're like, I'm a little bit burned out, this could change that potentially, depending on how you use it. And I share these things not because I want you to walk away from this, I'm going to be an automaton and I'm going to use this AI stuff. No, I share this with you because I love HR. I've already said it. I wanted to be an HR when I was a kid. I love the field. I love the people that do it. And I want you to have that same love. If you've lost a little bit, let's get you back to it. I already told you have a long to-do list. I've already mentioned that one. Your list may be longer than this gentleman's here. So let's talk about some of these sort of tools here. Some of the most common ones, and I got to update this slide because I think yesterday, the brand new one from Google just was released called Gemini, but ChatGPT is probably the one in the most headlines. Google's new Gemini tool, it used to be Bard. If you search that, you'll still find the new one. But they started releasing these tools. And as I said, they're trained on basically the internet. They're trained on these things called large language models. And these large language models pull together a lot of information and then allow you to query the system and get an answer back. And I'm telling you about these things here, and you may be like, well, I could probably get by without using this, but I've got to caution you. Because brand new research that just came out recently here in the States shows that about 7 to 10 graduates are using this on their resumes to customize and tailor their resumes to the job they're applying for. They'll upload their resume and say, here's the job description, here's my resume, make them match, make them fit. And that's going to create more difficulty for us to figure out which one of these candidates are the right ones when they're using this to try to slot themselves in and make themselves look like a good fit for the job, whether they are or not ultimately. So let's look at some examples of this. I'll give you a funny one just to start off, just to make you smile. You can ask anything of these tools, and I mean anything. For example, I said, I need a Taylor Swift style song for someone who's in love with human resources but doesn't know how to get a job in it. There you go, right? And I'm not going to sing this for you. I know, probably a big disappointment there. But you can ask anything, and I can guarantee you pretty much this question has never been asked before and probably will never be asked again. But it's just an example of how you can ask something and it generates and creates something brand new right there on the spot without any sort of extra practice, extra time. This takes about 10 seconds and there's your answer to the question that you ask. But you probably have a more practical need in your day-to-day work. So let's give you some more helpful, relevant questions. Maybe you say, I want to write a persuasive email to my boss. I've got to convince them of something and I want to be able to write that out. Well, one of the things that I do as a communicator is when I would write an email out, whether I was writing to my CEO, writing to my leadership team, writing to our employees, I'd write an email out, kind of get all my thoughts down on paper, and then I would delete it all and start again from scratch once I knew all the things and the sort of train of thought I had. It takes time. You could use this to create that persuasive email right off the bat. I'll give you an example in a minute of what it looks like. And then you could tailor and adjust and change it to your own tone, to your own company's tone, to your culture and how you communicate. All those things you can adjust it to your own needs there. Maybe you want to create a curriculum for a training course. I'll give you an example of that because when I talked a minute ago about my to-do list that I had years ago, at the bottom of that list was creating a leadership development program. And every quarter I was like, I'm going to get there this time. And every quarter it would come and go. And I kept pushing it out farther and farther because it was just too hard to find time to do it. So I'll show you how I did that in less than 10 minutes, in just a few minutes. And then last but not least, maybe you're hiring for a job you've never hired before. We've never hired this type of role. I need some draft interview questions for this job, and it can create those for you right there on the spot. If you actually upload a job description and post it in there, it can create interview questions based on and tailored to that job description and the things you put in there that are key requirements of the job. All these years later, probably 12 years ago, I had to hire for a position called a provisioner. And to this day, I still have no clue what that person actually did. All right, the hiring manager ended up picking someone, they were happy with it, but it was one of those things where I'm sending them candidates, like it looks like their resume has these sort of terms you've listed, but I have no idea what the person even does. And I asked multiple times to then explain it, and it still was completely impenetrable to me. So that would have been helpful in that case, to be able to have something like that, to be able to generate questions that I could ask to really vet them a little bit better. So let's dive into some of these things. I'll show you some examples of how this fits, how this works, and what it looks like. So this is an example from Google's Bard. Start looking a little different now that they're using Gemini probably. But I said, I want to write a convincing email to our leadership team to get them invested in a wellness program. We all know the benefits of having an employee workforce who's mentally and physically healthy and well and able to be productive at work. And so I asked it to create that for me. And what's interesting is, number one, I've never written an email ever in my life and never will that starts out, "Dear business leaders." So you can take that with a grain of salt. When I said write a convincing email, you'll notice through here that there are things like citations and references to actual research. Look at what the CDC says. Look at what this organization says. This healthcare organization did this study, and here's what they found. It starts pulling in stats and details and things to help you make your case if you tell it to write something convincing. And of course, again, as I said, you can adjust this. If this is very formal, like this is a little too formal for us, you can just say, hey, rewrite that with a little more informal approach, and it will adjust that a little bit. So that's an example of this right off the bat, creating something that you could use in your work day to day without you having to do much, if any, effort other than a little bit of tailoring on the back end to adjust it to your company, your tone, or even how you speak and communicate. You can go right now, if you get kind of excited about this today, you can go out and search, and you can find any number of lists that say, oh, here are 100 prompts you can use, ways you can ask questions. Here's 1,000 prompts you can use as an HR person. But the problem with those is they're all very surface level. If you know the metaphor of an iceberg, what you see of an iceberg sticking out of the water is actually the small fraction of it. The majority of it's actually below the surface of the water. And as an expert in HR, as someone who does this every day, that's what I'm going to call you to do. When you're thinking about using tools like this, don't just do that very surface level thing and skip off and leave, because you're leaving the rest of the value on the table. You're not using that. And I'm going to give you an example here of a way that I did that with a leadership development program, create a curriculum for that. And of course, as I'm going through this, if you're like, I don't care about the leadership development, maybe something else is your focus. Maybe it's another kind of program, or another approach, another way of supporting your people. Just hear me out, because I'll give you some ideas of how we know as HR leaders what's next and what's next and what's next. And it's what sets you apart from someone who has no idea how HR works, has no idea how it actually functions. From them just asking a question and getting an answer back and using that, you're going to still be more capable if you're using these tools, because you know what's next and what follows and how to use that properly. So let's dive into this. So as I told you, my someday task was creating a leadership development program. So here we're going to start out. I need a leadership development program outline and tailor it, customize it. We have core values at our company of integrity and clear communications and innovation. Weave that in, and it automatically does that. It generates that on the spot. Here's your outline for this course. But we know there's a lot more work to be done, right? I can't just create an outline and say, okay, well, we're finished. There's a lot more to be done here. So I'm going to get my leaders excited about this. So create an email in a friendly tone that gets them excited here. I've got to warn you, if you tell it to create something in an excited tone, it's going to use a heck of a lot of exclamation points in there. So if you don't use those in your own writing, or that's out of the norm for your company, you may need to adjust that, or ask it not, or, don't use the word excited tone, because you're going to get lots and lots of those. But this starts telling them about the program and gets them excited about it. And here's what you can expect. And there's so many good things. Okay. But we're still not done. When I've got them excited, but when they show up, I want them to be engaged. I want them to plug in. I want them to be connected with each other. So let's ask it for an icebreaker activity. And here we go, leadership bingo. It starts giving me a way to get them connected and communicating. Once they show up on site, they're going to be diving in, and we'll start benefiting from that from the first moment. Okay. But we all know that everything we train people on, they immediately remember it all and go do it all, right? Maybe not. It's hard for people to remember all those things. They don't always follow up with that. They don't always remember all the key details and takeaways. So give me a checklist of some things they can do every week to start supporting their people aligned with this leadership development program. And there we go. It starts giving them some key things to be following up on and focusing on and making sure they're checking those off, because that's behavior change. We know behavior change is an essential part of our job, but it's also the hardest part of our job. I'll give you one last example here, but I could go super, super deep on this. I'm going to create a feedback survey, questions and answers. Did this training work? Did it meet your needs? Do you feel like we had any gaps? What could we have done better? And it gives them a feedback survey to find out if this training was meeting their needs and doing the right things. And you could have other things to follow up here. You could ask for other stuff. Like, I need a script. So I'm going to have our CEO do a 30-second video about the training program and why I'm so proud of our team that's joined in here. Let the CEO, we'll record that with them, give me a script for that. And it can do it. It can do any of those kinds of things. And you may have other ideas already off the top of your head after seeing some of this. I created all of this. I told you I kept pushing this off for months and months. And I mean, over a year, I pushed this off because I didn't have the time to do it. I created all of these things that you've seen in the last 2 or 3 minutes in less than 10 minutes. Created all of that to be able to use and repurpose and retool and solve that problem. And it would have changed that for me if I'd had this kind of thing in my hands back then. Now, here's some tips for you, of someone who's done this for a while. The tone matters. If you as an HR person are a little bit more conservative and you're a little bit more straight-laced or a little bit more, formal, then asking it to do things in a different tone is going to sound weird and out of place. You can use those words. Use this more, be more formal. And on the opposite end is true. If you're more friendly and you're like, this is fun and I love this, you can ask it to use those words to describe the tone, and it will adjust it to fit who you are and how you communicate. Don't be afraid to ask for a follow-up there. So if you don't like the answer, ask it to revise that and change this, or that's too long, condense it, or this is not long enough, I need you to expand that, or really rewrite this, but emphasize this point. You can have any of those sorts of things, and it will tailor that to what you're asking. And as I said, you know what's next. As an HR leader, you know what logically follows, just like that process I walked out with you just now in the training example. You know what happens after that. And so ask for a follow-up there. If you're using this for onboarding purposes, ask for, okay, I know this thing happens right after that, or this happens right after that. And keep asking those, what's next? And how can I use this to make me better, to save me time, to take care of this, because it's going to make you, again, more capable, faster, all that good stuff. Now, if you want, we've gone through, and as I said, you can go online, find any number of these. If you go search for, I need 100, 1,000, 10,000, you can find them, I'm probably sure. But if you want a list of 15 that we've actually vetted and tested out, things across compensation, training, hiring, development, all the things you can imagine, benefits and communications, like all of that stuff, you can get that completely free. We give those out as a way to help our friends that are trying to think about this in a more critical way, and to help those of you get your feet under you a little bit and find an area that's most relevant to plug into the work you're doing. Because there's so many ways this can be used to solve big problems that you have in your work every single day. Now, I've shared some examples with you. I'm going to actually go through and give you a really quick run through. So hold on to your seat. A way that you can use these prompts, these queries, these questions to save you about a week's worth of work in the next 12 months. And now if you do a lot more of one thing than another, maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's a little bit less than that. If I'm half wrong, you save 20 hours worth of work in the next year. And I think all of us would probably be okay with that if we were able to have more of an impact than we already were in the work that we're doing. So I'm going to run through and give you some examples of that really quickly, just what that looks like across the board, across the spectrum, and see if there's some things that appeal to you and stand out. Okay, so on the recruiting front, there's lots of ways to do this. When we're doing our research right now, in our research study, we do a lot of surveys with employers, with candidates. We also talked about 300 different HR technology providers every single year. And what we find right now, most companies that are using generative AI in hiring are using it for creating new job descriptions, new job ads, also for outreach content. So sending things to candidates, whether it's trying to introduce them to a job, whether it's trying to tell them thank you, but no thank you, whether it's trying to get them excited about your company culture and get them into your talent pool. Any of those things are the most common ways we're seeing that. So writing and creating a bunch of content. I mentioned researching job interview questions. All those are great examples of how we can be using this tool on the recruiting front and save us a lot of time throughout the year. On the other side of the coin, once they're already on board, what about benefits and training and comp? So the benefits one is a really fun one. So I was talking to an automotive organization recently, and they said, we have a challenge, because when we're talking to our staff who work in our factories and they're building these cars, they said their average education is like a 10th grade or maybe a high school education, but not beyond that. And so when we explain to them what our benefits are, it goes over their head because we're explaining it in HR speak and they can't grasp what all these things mean. And so I said, let's test this out. We plugged their description of their benefits into ChatGPT and said, make this understandable for an automotive workforce with an average 10th grade education. And it rewrites all of that right there in the moment. And it starts giving examples where it says, hey, you know how this part works on a car and how it connects to this other thing? That's how your deductible works in your insurance and how that part fits in. And it starts explaining to them in ways that make it relevant. It puts it on their level so they can understand it and actually use those benefits appropriately and to their full extent. If we're paying for them, we want them to use them. So it's a great example of how this tailors in a way that we simply couldn't as humans. I couldn't adjust and adapt that to a 10th grade level. As much as I love to write and communicate, I still couldn't do that well, but that can do it very easily. I told you I would not like a futuristic sort of look at the things. I don't love that part of it, but one of my friends who's in the analytics space says one of the problems he runs into a lot is he meets with a lot of individuals who are in that analytics space who are neurodiverse. And he said, so I'm talking to someone who is on the autism spectrum, and they have a hard time understanding the format of content that's shared with them. But he said, we're getting to the point now where you can say, here's what was shared with me. I need you to create this for me in the form of a dialogue or a conversation, and it can regenerate that in the moment so they can actually grasp it. Or I need to see this information in the form of a graphic novel. Create a comic book for me that shows me this information. They can consume it in a way that's approachable to them. So again, that's not too far off in the future. That's right there on the horizon. And I love those examples of making the information we share more accessible, more relatable, more useful for every one of the people that we serve. And last but not least, I'll throw out onboarding, offboarding, communications. Like one of the things you can do here, the last one that's an example that's kind of fun is if you report up to leadership, you report up to the CEO, and you're like, man, I get nervous when I've got to pitch this idea. You can ask it to, okay, I need you to do a role play. I need you to play the role of my leader, and I'm trying to get you to agree to this thing. And it will go back and forth with you in a dialogue and have the back and forth and let you practice your arguments and think through your counterpoints. It's like a debate almost without having to face someone else in person. And you get to practice thinking through your key points and how you're going to communicate that before you ever show up and do this face-to-face to someone else. So I love those examples there. And again, lots of ways that this can be wrapped into the work that we do every day. As I said earlier, it is not my goal for you to finish this and feel like you're producing HR widgets. You're just creating more stuff or being more productive. Chasing productivity is a losing game because no one goes and says, wow, that's a super productive HR person. No one celebrates that. People celebrate the HR people that understand their needs, that support them, that support the business, that serve the needs of the organization and the workforce and balance those things because it's often a difficult tightrope to walk. But no one says, oh, that was a super productive HR leader that I worked with. And they were great. But I've never heard that in all the years I've been speaking and writing and sharing in this space. It's about using these things to get closer to our people and serve them better, understand them better, help them better, not just to crank out more widgets overall. If you pay attention to the headlines around ChatGPT and some of this other stuff, you may have heard about a thing called hallucinations. And this reference makes more sense for my friends over here on this side of the pond. But Abraham Lincoln famously said, don't believe everything you read on the internet. Okay, probably not. He didn't say that, but it's an example of how some of the things that we hear from ChatGPT aren't real. And I'll give you an example of that. So I was doing some research on artificial intelligence and pay equity. We do research every other year, a big study on compensation trends, how companies are using data in that space. And so we asked a question about that, and it said, oh, well, you should use this Starbucks AI case study. That'd be a great one. I was like, oh, I didn't know about that. Tell me more. So when I asked it to explain that to me, it said, oh, sorry, that's actually not a real case study. I just made that up. So some of the things that I've told you to ask today are pretty safe, are pretty low risk. Give me some interview questions, help me think through this thing, give me a running start. You'll notice I have not asked you once to help me decide this major HR strategy. What direction should our company go? Because you'll get answers back and I don't fully trust everything that comes back. But overall, asking it for inputs or advice or ideas, probably a safe bet. Asking it for things like that, as you can see, it sometimes runs into issues and hiccups and problems overall. Now, what we hear from our friends here in the US from a government perspective is that employers are liable for the decisions they make. We all probably know that already, but if they're using a cool AI tool or not, doesn't matter, because they're still going to be responsible for whatever those outputs are and whatever decisions they make at the end of the day. We're going to be accountable for that. And so we can't just hand it off and hope for the best, because AI still isn't as capable as all of us in our work. Now, you may have heard this for the last 40 minutes or so and thought, that's pretty amazing, but what does this mean for me? What does my future look like? I care about the HR profession. Do I have a job? Do I have opportunities? And so I'll tell you a couple of things. Number one, we do a lot of things because we've always done them, even if there's no real benefit. So one of our friends here that locally, she had house set for someone recently, and they came back and said, well, thank you, Emily. We appreciate you. We got you this plant. And Emily is a brown thumb. Okay. She kills any sort of plant she gets near. She is not great at growing things. And for whatever reason, they gave her a plant. And so she said, this time I'm going to do it right. So she starts watering it on a regular schedule. She puts it by the window for sunlight and moves it away so it doesn't get too much sunlight. She's really being careful about this plant. And after a few months of doing this, she's doing something at the counter and bumps it and knocks the whole thing in the floor. It's like, oh no, I've taken care of this plant. Now I've killed it. And she picks it up and realizes that the plant is fake. It's not even real. And Emily learned something that all of us have learned already in our HR jobs. We've already learned this lesson that sometimes we do stuff just because we've always done it, even if there's no measurable impact. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't affect anything. She could have watered that thing for the next 10 years and it would have looked and felt and been exactly the same. And what's an opportunity for us right now is, with AI changing and shaking up a little bit of the work we're doing, it gives us a chance to say, listen, we've always done it this way, but now we have a chance to do it that way because it's going to have a better impact on our people. Or we've always done it this way, but we're going to try something new and different. We're going to experiment a little bit. We're going to give our creativity a chance in HR, because that sets us apart from this algorithm that can automate all of the stuff we're doing, but doesn't do it in a creative sort of way. So I love that story and love Emily for giving me a chance to share that one. One of the things that you may have wondered about is bias. What about, yeah, but I've seen all the headlines. AI is totally biased. It's going to wreck it all. There are examples of AI being biased. There are also ways that AI levels the playing field and reduces bias. For example, Uber uses an algorithm to set pay rates for its drivers. Okay. They're not employees, they're contractors, but go with me here for a second. Those drivers, the pay gap between men and women is about half of what it is in the open market. Is there still a gap? Yes. But is it less than there is overall? Yes. It's a gender blind algorithm. Okay. There's lots of examples where AI is being used to help level the playing field and make it more fair for people, reduce bias overall, but there is still potential for bias. So there's an example where scientists took this experiment with an algorithm and gave it 2 million books. Consume these books. Okay. Tell us what a man is like. And the algorithm came back and said, oh, a man is righteous or just or gallant or whatever. And then it said, okay, describe a woman for me. And it said, oh, well, a woman is fair or pretty or ugly or whatever else. And what they found when they looked at and started comparing these, excuse me, is that men, it was giving you all these traits, this personality and character traits. Women, it was giving a lot of looks and how others perceived them by the outward appearance. And it's because they had trained it on this giant data set of books that painted those two stereotypes. And they're like, well, we'd assumed that using this broad base of knowledge, it would be pretty even and pretty fair. But even that shows that it's not always. So they can be skewed with bias. And that absolutely does happen. You are the bias expert in your business right now, by the way. You were yesterday. You will be tomorrow. That doesn't change. We have to have a little bit of a heightened awareness. But if someone came to you and said, listen, we're going to give you this really amazing algorithm. It predicts which of your candidates are going to be the best ones to hire. And it looks at the zip codes or the postal codes where they live. Well, most of us would say, hold on a minute. That could actually indicate their socioeconomic status. That could indicate their gender or potentially their race, depending on where they're living. That's not something we can use. But other people may not know that. So you are already the experts in the business to see and understand and look for those kind of connections and know what we can and can't use, what those signals might be, the algorithm's considering, you're already the expert and you need to be in the future as well. If I pressed you here and said, of all these different answers, all these different choices here, what would be the ones that really show and indicate the best sort of HR function? Which ones show an HR function that's high impact, it's having the right sort of support for the people and support of the business? Probably not regimented and unyielding, right? Transactional. We're just getting stuff done. We're not actually having an impact on people. Now, we know intuitively what those things are that set a great HR function apart from the rest, and what sets a great HR person and professional apart from the rest. It's wild to me when we look at this. There's actually an unwritten rule that if you're a research nerd like me, you have to have a 2x2 grid of something. And so the one that I created was, how do we know what should be automated and what we should be doing as HR professionals? What should we keep our hands on and never let go of? And what should we gladly pass off to that algorithm so we don't have to do it anymore? Right? Give you that example earlier of the kind of tasks in your ranking list there. And what we find in the data, in the examples and the case studies all across science, tells us that when something is very process focused, very routine, that's a great candidate to hand it to automation, to have AI handle it, to let that go. When it's very human focused and when it's very dynamic, or either or, the more likely we need a human in the mix. I don't know about you, but when one of my employees says, listen, I just had a death in the family and we're trying to figure out what's next, I don't want an algorithm saying, here's your bereavement policy, hope all's well. No, I want to be the human in the mix saying, I am so sorry to hear that. Where can we send flowers? Is there something we can do for you? How much time do you need? I want a human in the mix on those kinds of things that are very human focused. The other thing we see is the more dynamic or unpredictable it is, the more we need a human in the mix. There's this term they use in the research called a kind or unkind learning environment. Tell me which one of these sounds like the work you do every day. You know all of the variables, you know all the parameters on every decision. When you make a decision, you know if it's right or wrong immediately. Okay, is that your workload? Is that your work day? Or we never know all the variables. We make a decision, we may not find out for 6 months, a year, never if it was the right decision or the wrong decision. We don't know the parameters or all the rules around this. We don't know all the details. HR falls in that second bucket. We fall in that second where it's very an unkind learning environment. It's what scientists call it, because it's almost impossible to train how to do that. And when you're learning HR, it's not a book that you can read and you're good at it. It's experience and test and trial by fire. And, oh, I misstepped last time, I'll do it better next time. We learn that way because it's so dynamic and unpredictable. That's why we need a human in the mix. And when we look at the history of automation around the world, and we look at that wave that passes by whenever there's mechanical automation or digital automation more recently, that wave that passes by, it leaves behind certain skills. It strips away some and leaves other things behind. And these are the things that are left behind ultimately, these 5 core human skills that are things that we naturally do. Some of you may say, well, I'm not very creative or I'm not very curious, but these are things that humans naturally do. Kids do them really well. And over time, we ask fewer questions, we get less curious, we get that drilled out of us, or we think I'm not as creative as I used to be, but they're human skills that an algorithm can't easily replicate. It can't automate those things. It can't replicate those things. They're things that we do intuitively. And I would encourage you, if you're thinking, wow, Ben shared some cool stuff, but what does this mean for me in the future? Focus on these skills. We can't teach algorithms to do this stuff the same way that you can, to the same degree of specificity that you can. And you can be indispensable long-term if you have this sort of skill set in your toolbox, in your toolkit, and in the team around you, by the way. If you've got a team, you lead a team of HR leaders, make sure they're developing these things. If you've got someone that's like, oh, I'm really good at analyzing data, and that's their biggest strength, they better find another skill really quickly, because the AI is way better than we are at analyzing data and finding the trends and themes. I'll close with this story and then see if there's any questions or anything else that I can answer for you here in the time we have left. So about 9 years ago, we were driving to the hospital because my wife was about to have a baby. I was completely freaked out, had no idea what to expect. And so I'm very calmly driving, 500 miles an hour to get there. And we get in and they attach this thing to our stomach called a tachometer. What you see actually on the back of the screen here is a readout from a tachometer machine. It's measuring the strength of the contractions my wife is going through. And if you've already probably figured it out, I'm the data nerd in pretty much every room I'm in. And so I'm looking at this readout, just fascinated at what's happening on the screen. And behind me, I hear my wife say, "Ooh, that was a rough one." And I said, on the screen, it wasn't actually that bad when you compare it to this other one over here. And the wrong thing to say, wrong time. If she could have gotten up, I might not be here to share with you today. Okay, I might not be alive. But I tell that story because it's easy for me to get caught up in the numbers and the evidence and the data points and everything else. And what is actually true is behind every employee number, behind every report you run on your workforce, those things aren't just data points. They're people, their families, their hopes and dreams for a future, their career aspirations. There's all those things wrapped up into each individual person that we have the privilege and the responsibility to serve as HR leaders. And so I want you to know AI is changing a lot of things about the work we do. Absolutely. You've seen examples today, but it doesn't change that need, that fundamental need for us to be the humans leading and supporting and doing the hard work of human resources. So again, thank you for letting me share. If you want to reach out, you want to ask a question about the research, there's the QR code again, if you want to get those generative AI prompts. But it is my hope that this gives you some good grounding in that, some good ideas for how you can use it for your own work every single day. And also gives you the encouragement that, yeah, if things are changing, they're new, they're different, but that core need to be the human that serves another human has not gone away or changed and probably never will.
Oh my goodness, that was such a brilliant session, Ben. Thank you so much. And will we be okay to share that QR code for the people that joined us as well? Brilliant. So we'll get that back out to everybody when we send out the recordings. So I'm going to open up the floor now. If anyone has any questions for Ben, feel free to either pop it in the chat or pop your hand up and we can unmute you. I am pretty sure that Emma will have some questions or points that she would like to discuss whilst you think of your other questions that you might like to ask. So Emma, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Katie. And thanks, Ben. That was absolutely amazing. Yeah, I don't know where to start really. So much buzzing around in my head. Just a quick story first of all. I loved your example of the Taylor Swift thing there. Reminds me, my sister was 50 last year, and I've got her tickets to go see Madonna. And I said to ChatGPT, I said, write me a like 8-line or 16-line poem using only Madonna lyrics to tell my sister I've got her tickets to go see Madonna for her birthday. And it was absolutely brilliant. I did about 6 different versions, had to choose them, but it was just brilliant. It was like literally there straight away. And it would have taken me, well, I couldn't have done it, but a long time to do that. So I just thought I'd share that as an example.
Well, I have a good friend. So I was going to have a friend who's in the learning space. And so people ask questions about learning all the time. So he's trained it on all of his writings over the last 10 years, all of his speeches he's given. And there's the fun little caveat where if you ask a question of that bot, it gives you the answer from all of his accumulated knowledge, but it also includes a reference to Back to the Future, the movie. And so every time you ask it, it will find a way to weave in some sort of reference to that. And he said the answers it gives on the learning are like 90%, but the references it gives, he said, I never could do that. So it's like a fun thing. And again, that probably has not a lot of practical value in our work day to day. But I used to love when I was running HR. I also ran comms at one point as well for all the employees. And I was always like, what's something funny or interesting I could send out with this to get them to actually open and read this? Wouldn't we all like our people to actually read the things we're sending out?
Totally. And I think that's one of I've been playing around with it for probably about a year or so now. And I think for me, that's just getting a start of a 10 is one of the kind of key benefits I've found. And I think there's just so much great advice and, some very clear sort of very realistic picture of what it can and can't do, which I think is really helpful. I mean, I know when I first started using it, I hadn't realized that it only goes up to sort of 2021. I think they're changing that, aren't they? In terms of that's coming soon. But I was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. That's interesting. And I got all excited and thought I'd be able to get to like a literature review. And it's like, no, can't do that for you. Sorry. It wouldn't do that. It would bring in, like you said, little bits of, it would reference kind of little bits, but it wouldn't do a full, because I was thinking as a researcher, psychologist, I'm like, oh my goodness, I get to do my lit review. That'd be amazing and save me like weeks and months. And it's like, no, can't do that. So I think it's just really interesting hearing from you around what it can and can't do. And you talked a lot about prompts, and for those of you on the EX space, we did a webinar about ChatGPT and prompts, and I've definitely learned a lot over, and there's loads of prompts on like you shared your prompts, you've got a lot on EX space as well. And I've definitely, gotten much better. And I mean, you'll know this, but one of my reflections is that, you just kind of learn the art of prompting, don't you, as you get more familiar with it, and you realize actually I need to. The question I ask is a really important part of getting a good response out of it.
Mhm.
So I think it's great that you've shared some prompts there. So thank you for that. Trying to think of other reflections as well. Yeah, I mean, again, I loved your your kind of mindset piece at the end. Because there is a lot of panic at the moment, I think, with people kind of thinking, it's going to take my job. And I think just coming back to those core human skills, or strengths, if you like, I think is a really great way to look at it. I think we've got, is that a question coming in, Katie, or not?
Yeah, there is a question.
Great, let's go for it. Let's ask the question then. I didn't want to. I was just sort of chatting until we had some questions coming in. I'm mindful of time, but go for it. Ask the question, Katie.
Brilliant, thank you. Oh, there's a couple have come in now. So, okay. Do you have any further examples of how organizations are using AI to mitigate against human bias to leverage AI for, I think, is that meant to be equality? I think maybe.
Equity. It's okay. Yeah, that's so I'll give you an example of that really quickly. So there's two examples of that. Number one of our big pieces of research last year looked at employee mobility and growth in the business. And one of the things we found is that women were 50% more likely to say that they didn't have visibility into the internal opportunities in the business. So for the companies, you're saying, well, we can't find enough women leaders. Like, maybe you're not making them visible to those people. And so what can we do about that? And so increasingly, we're seeing companies that are using, larger companies that are using AI tools to help with career mobility, so that Emma has this chatbot running alongside her. What do you want to be when you grow up? Some version of that. And she's like, oh, I'm curious about this career path. Okay, well, here's the skills that you need to finish that out. And if you want to go take this training in our learning management system, that'll help you close that gap and you'll be ready to go. And so the AI tools are helping those individuals to step into that and to really make it visible and create opportunities for them. So that's a good way of doing that. The other one on the hiring side that I find very interesting is I ran across this tool a little while back that if you are a candidate and you upload your resume to that, we've all probably seen the data overall that generally says that women, people of color, less likely to advocate for themselves or less likely to think that they're a fit for a role, right? A man's 7% fit. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going for it. A woman's a 90% fit. And she's like, I'm not quite sure I'm a good enough candidate for this. And so what this tool does is looks right there when you upload your resume and says, okay, Mary, you're a 95% fit for this job or 90% fit for this job. But we've already got 4 candidates who applied who are a 98% or higher. So you're not very competitive for this one. You can still apply if you want to, but we have another job over here. One candidate has applied and they're only an 80% fit. Would you like to apply for that other role? So in the moment, it's helping Mary see in very clear terms her skills, her qualifications, the job she's a fit for. And what's really interesting to me is when we actually ask candidates in our research. We asked last year over 1,000 global candidates, would you be okay with the company using AI in the hiring process? And for selecting them, absolutely not. They do not want an AI tool selecting them. But for helping them find jobs that are fit for their skills, helping them see opportunities they didn't know were available, absolutely, they are super excited about those sorts of ways that AI can be used to help them get early answers and things like that, but they don't want to be ultimately selected by it. So there's a couple examples of how we can use this to get better at that. I wrote this piece about a year ago. I need to refresh it and post it again, called 10 Reasons Humans Are Terrible at Hiring. And it comes down to a lot of the biases that we have. When scientists look at it, the human brain has something like 190 different biases in it. And so all those, if they're influencing how we're buying bread at the grocery store, they're influencing how we hire people and support them in the workplace. And so anything that can help us get around that and look at that, make it visible and tangible, can help us to make a hopefully more equitable decision for every single person involved. So great question.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. There have been a couple others come through, but I am aware that we are 1 minute from wrapping up. So instead, I'd just like to use this opportunity to thank you again for joining us today. It's been such a great session. You'll see in the chat, we've got a lot of people who've really taken a lot from the session today. And as promised, we'll make sure that we get those slides out with the QR code on as well for anybody that has signed up, and obviously the EX Space members as well. Just before I say a final thank you and goodbye to Ben, just a quick reminder of what we've got coming up around the corner. So our next Expert Insights webinar will be with the wonderful Julie Hodges, and we are going to be talking about we're going to be talking about people-centric organizational change. And I'm just double checking the date on that one. That's going to be next week on the 21st of Feb at 1 p.m. If you're in the UK, obviously different time zones apply different times. But as always, we will send out the recordings afterwards if you're unable to join us live, if you sign up. Thank you again, Ben. I will hand over to Emma to officially close this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Ben. Really interesting session. Yeah, we'll share the recording, we'll share the slides, and we'll also share some answers to the questions we haven't got to today, just trying to be respectful of people's time. And I'm sure this, we'll be continuing this conversation long after the session. So thank you so much, Ben, for giving us some really practical, useful tips and food for thought. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you all soon. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, whatever part of the Monday you're in. Thanks, everybody.